You don't belong here. Where'd you get these tickets? Stolen Sofia Martinez's voice sliced through the first-class cabin like a blade, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her eyes narrowed at the two young black girls sitting in seats 1A and 1B. Her posture was stiff, righteous, like she had caught two criminals mid-crime. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slightly, their silence speaking volumes. But Ana Sanchez didn't flinch. She sat upright, chin raised. "You're making a mistake." "Ma'am," she said calmly. "Our tickets are valid." Her twin sister, Nora, beside her, lowered her eyes but held Anna's hand. Fingers tightly woven. Neither girl looked like they were about to budge. "Just before we get into what happened next, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments below. And if stories like this matter to you, hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep sharing them." Now, back to the moment everything changed. It was early morning at Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. Flight 418 was preparing for takeoff to New York, in the calm of first class. Two black teenage girls had taken their seats. Their presence didn't match what Sofia, the 38-year-old flight attendant, had expected. Her mind didn't go to merit or family or achievement. It went straight to suspicion. Ana Sanchez. 14 had always been the bolder twin. She knew how to hold her ground. Nora, quiet and thoughtful, was the analyzer. They balanced each other like sunlight and shadow, both dressed neatly in matching navy blazers and skirts, with debate club pins on their lapels, ready to compete at the National Invitational, an event that could earn them scholarships. Their father had booked first-class tickets. He always said, "You don't shrink to make others comfortable." But none of that mattered now. Sofia hovered over them like they were intruders. "I'm asking you one more time," she barked. "Show me the confirmation or I'll call security." Ana calmly handed over the printed ticket, but Sofia barely looked at it. "Anyone can fake a printout," she muttered, then turned sharply. Andrew A., tall white man in TSA security uniform, stepped through the cabin entrance. Andrew Martin, 40, known around the airport for his no-nonsense attitude. Didn't ask questions. "Stand up, please," he ordered. Nora hesitated. Ana stood, her voice even. "Sir, if you check your system, you'll see these seats were bought by our father, Jack Sanchez." But Andrew didn't check. He reached for Anna's backpack. "We're not doing this here," he said. "Come with me." As they were pulled down the aisle, Justin Harris, a white man in his 50s in seat 3A, leaned toward the passenger next to him. "Kids like them always cause trouble," he muttered. "One stole my briefcase last year in Chicago." The words weren't loud, but they were meant to be heard. And they were... Nora turned, her voice quiet but cutting. "We're not your past mistake." "Sir," Olivia Smith, a 60-year-old retired teacher in 3B, frowned. Her instinct told her something was wrong, but like many, she didn't speak. Not yet. The jetway felt colder than the plane. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Andrew led the girls to a holding area, an empty room with plastic chairs and a metal table. "You need to learn to respect authority," he said, arms crossed. "When someone in uniform gives an order, you follow it." Ana, composed but burning inside, replied, "Sir, respect goes both ways." Nora had already pulled out her phone and was texting someone. Her thumbs moved quickly. Ana leaned in. "Did you tell him?" Nora nodded. "I told Dad. He's on his way." Meanwhile, back on the plane, Sofia returned to the cockpit. "Handled it," she said confidently. "Captain Nathan Wright." 55 nodded without lifting his head from the flight checklist. "Good call," he muttered. "Can't take risks up here. First class should feel safe." Justin, watching nearby, added, "I feel better already." Sofia smiled, but not everyone agreed. Olivia unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped into the aisle. "Excuse me," she called after Sofia. "Why were those girls removed?" Sofia turned, stiff. It's a safety protocol. Olivia raised an eyebrow. They didn't look like a threat. They looked like kids. Sophia's jaw clenched. With everything going on these days, I trust my instincts. Further back in row 6, a young black woman in a smart tan blazer glanced up from her phone. Harper Thomas, 28, freelance journalist and social media influencer, had seen too many moments like this. She discreetly pulled out her phone and hit record. As Sophia turned back into the cockpit, Harper posted 2 black girls kicked out of first class for being black at 3,000 feet. Racism still flies. Hashtag Justice for Twins. The video uploaded in seconds, within minutes. It had 1,000 views, then 2,000, then 5,000. Still in the cabin, 24-year-old Camilla Morris, a black trainee flight attendant, felt her chest tighten. Something wasn't right. She slipped into the galley and checked the passenger manifest. Her eyes scanned the list and stopped. Anna Sanchez and Nora Sanchez, seats 1A and 1B, confirmed. She approached Sophia. Ma'am, their tickets were real. I checked. They're on the manifest. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Stay out of this. You're still learning. Watch and don't interfere. Back in the holding room. Anna sat still. He's almost here, Nora said, glancing at her phone. Anna nodded. They're going to regret this. Just then, Harper's video passed 5,000 views. The comments poured in. Shameful. Sue the airline. This is why we need cameras on flights. The incident was spreading like wildfire, and Jack Sanchez was on his way. Jack Sanchez, 45, had built American Sky Airlines with his own hands. From working baggage to running logistics to becoming the youngest black CEO in the airline industry. He knew exactly how airports worked. And how they failed. The moment he got Nora's text, he didn't call, he moved. While the girls sat in that plastic chair room, heads held high, and the crew prepared to take off without them. Something much bigger was taking off in real time, a storm the staff never saw coming. And at the center of it, 2 young girls who did everything right, but were treated like they didn't belong. And now, the man behind their tickets, behind their upbringing, behind the airline itself, was walking into the terminal. Who is Jack Sanchez? And what will he do when he confronts the people who humiliated his daughters? Andrew Martin stood stiffly in the corner of the holding room, arms crossed, eyes hard. The sterile light above flickered faintly, casting cold shadows over the 2 girls seated in front of him. Anna sat upright, chin held high, while Nora remained composed, thumbs dancing over her phone, checking for updates from their father. The tension was suffocating. Andrew hadn't offered water, hadn't checked their boarding information, hadn't even asked their names. You need to understand something, he said, his voice laced with condescension. When authority speaks, you listen. That's how we maintain order. Anna met his gaze calmly. Sir, order doesn't mean ignoring the truth. Our names are on your manifest. Andrew scoffed and looked away, refusing to verify anything. His mind was made up. In his eyes, they were 2 disruptive kids who didn't belong in first class. Outside the room, passengers were still boarding, the cabin murmuring with low chatter and growing curiosity. Sophia Martinez stood with her arms folded at the galley, speaking in hushed tones to Captain Nathan Wright. They acted defensive, she explained, didn't even offer IDs at first. Nathan, a man who prided himself on keeping things running smoothly, nodded. You made the right call. These days, you can't be too careful. Nearby. Justin Harris leaned back in his plush seat, adjusting his gold watch, his voice dripping with authority as he shared his story with a curious passenger beside him. Last year in Chicago, a young black teen snatched my briefcase, gone in seconds. Ever since then, I don't take chances. You see 2 kids like that up here, I trust my gut. His words carried across the aisle. Olivia Smith, seated across from him, clenched her jaw. Maybe your gut's not the problem, she muttered under her breath. But still, she said nothing aloud. The weight of silence filled the space. Not everyone was silent, though, in row 6, Harper Thomas was refreshing her phone, watching as her video gained traction. The clip, just 23 seconds long, showed Anna calmly stating their tickets were valid, and Sophia brushing it off before calling security. By the time Harper added a caption, "They're just kids. This is what profiling looks like." The video had crossed 6,000 views. She reposted it to TikTok and X with the hashtag #Justice4Twins. The comments were flooding in. Unbelievable. Not again. Sue them. Some comments were vile, others painfully honest, but most rallied behind the girls. Meanwhile, Camilla Morris couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. She was still new, just 3 months into her flight attendant training, and she'd been warned to observe, not interfere. But after confirming the Sanchez twins' names on the manifest, she felt her stomach twist. She approached Sophia again, this time holding the printed passenger list. They're confirmed, seats 1A and 1B. Look, Sophia didn't glance. I told you to stay out of it. Camilla, do you want to make it past training? Her tone was low, clipped. Camilla backed off but didn't return to her jump seat. Instead, she stood quietly near the galley, listening, watching, and recording notes on her phone in the holding room. Nora finally received a reply. "He's pulling up now," she whispered to Anna. "Dad's here." Anna gave a small nod, her voice calm as ever. "Good. Let them keep talking. He'll hear everything." Andrew paced the room, still oblivious. "You kids don't know how the real world works," he sneered. "You want first-class treatment? You earn it. Not flash some forged ticket and throw a tantrum." Nora's voice was quiet but razor-sharp. "Sir, what does the real world look like to you? Is it only safe when it's white?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Andrew blinked, stunned by the boldness, before he could reply. The door opened. Adam Turner stepped in first, tablet in hand, suit pressed and perfect. Behind him, Jack Sanchez filled the doorway with calm authority, at 6'2", with a steady gaze and a presence that turned heads in boardrooms and press rooms alike. He scanned the scene without a word. Anna and Nora stood, Daddy, his arms wrapped around them, brief but grounding. Then he turned to Andrew. "I want to hear exactly what happened, and I want to know why you haven't checked the system to confirm their tickets." Andrew stiffened. "I was told they didn't belong in first class." Jack's voice didn't rise, but it cut like glass. "By whom?" "The flight attendant, Sophia Martinez." Andrew said. "She said they were suspicious, refused to provide ID." Jack turned to Adam. "Show me the booking record." Adam tapped the tablet and turned the screen. Confirmed, 2 first-class seats. Anna and Nora Sanchez, booked under the corporate account, cleared through all security, no flags. Jack turned back to Andrew. "So what's the real reason they were removed?" Andrew faltered. "Look, we're trained to respond quickly." "No," Jack interrupted. Still calm, "You're trained to respond intelligently, with integrity, neither of which I've seen here, at that moment." Camilla appeared behind Jack. "Mr. Sanchez," she said cautiously, "I checked the manifest. Their names were there. I tried to tell Sophia, but she shut me down." Jack looked at her, his expression softening. "Thank you." His eyes swept the space. "Where is Sophia now?" Adam checked his watch. "She's on the plane, prepping for departure." Jack turned to Andrew. "You will escort me to that aircraft. Now." As they stepped into the corridor, Harper's video hit 12,000 views. People were tagging news stations, civil rights groups, legal organizations. Hashtag #Justice4Twins was trending nationally. Back in the cockpit, Sophia was reviewing safety procedures with Nathan. Olivia leaned across the aisle toward Justin. "Do you ever think maybe you're part of the problem?" she asked, her voice level. Justin shrugged. "I'm just being honest. Call it what you want." "I will," she said. "It's called prejudice." Harper caught that on camera, too, as Jack moved swiftly toward the gate with Adam and Camilla behind him. Tension rippled down the corridor. The situation was no longer just a misunderstanding. It was a reckoning, and no one on that flight, not Sophia, not Andrew, not even the captain, was ready for who just walked into the storm: the CEO, the father, the man they never thought they'd have to answer to, and he was bringing the truth with him. Jack Sanchez walked through the terminal with the controlled intensity of a man who had climbed too many mountains to be ignored now. Behind him, Adam Turner tapped rapidly on his tablet, gathering time-stamped records, while Camilla Morris followed closely, her heart pounding, not just with nerves, but with quiet hope. As they neared Gate C-22 Airport, staff stiffened, sensing something had shifted. Jack's presence wasn't loud, but it was undeniable when he stepped onto the jet bridge. Andrew Martin trailed silently behind, no longer in control, just a shadow to the man now commanding the room. At the aircraft door, Sophia Martinez turned mid-sentence, her face draining of color as she locked eyes with Jack. "Mr. Sanchez? I didn't know you were coming," she stammered. Jack didn't return her greeting. "Where are my daughters?" Sophia blinked, hesitated, then motioned awkwardly. "They were removed for safety reasons, sir. Protocol." Her voice faded under the weight of her own doubt. Jack stepped into the cabin, where passengers now craned their necks, murmuring. Harper Thomas had her phone out again, live streaming with quiet urgency. "He's here," she whispered to her followers. "Jack Sanchez, the CEO, and he looks furious." In the middle of the aisle, Anna and Nora stood tall beside Olivia Smith, who had come to greet them. Jack pulled his daughters into a quick embrace. "You okay?" he asked. Anna nodded. "We're fine now." Nora's voice was soft but steady. "They didn't believe we belonged." Jack turned slowly, his eyes scanning the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "I'm Jack Sanchez, CEO of American Sky Airlines, and today, my daughters were removed from their rightful seats in first class by people who failed to do the most basic thing: verify the truth." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Sophia stepped forward. "Sir, I was following instinct." The girls seemed evasive. "You didn't check their names," Jack interrupted. "You didn't look them up in the system. You judged them on sight." Nathan Wright entered from the cockpit, his expression guarded. "Mr. Sanchez," he said, "we support our crew when they make security decisions." Jack turned to him. "Captain, you're responsible for this aircraft and everyone on board. That includes ensuring your crew exercises good judgment, not prejudice." Nathan bristled. "We acted out of caution." Jack's voice dropped. "No, you acted out of assumption." Harper's live stream surged to over 25,000 views as Jack continued. "These girls weren't loud. They weren't disruptive. They were polite, seated, and properly ticketed. They were flying to represent their school in a national debate competition, and they were treated like criminals." Olivia Smith finally spoke aloud, facing the cabin. "I watched it happen. I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. But I'll say it now. It was wrong. Those girls showed more grace than the crew did." Sophia's face reddened. "This is getting blown out of proportion. I didn't mean anything by it. Intent doesn't erase impact." Jack replied, "You may not have meant to humiliate them, but you did." Camila, standing near the galley, held up the passenger manifest. "Here's the record. Anna Sanchez, Nora Sanchez, seats 1A and 1B, cleared, confirmed, and paid in full by the corporate account 3 weeks ago." Jack nodded to Adam. "Document all of this, every word, every witness, Justin Harris, who had shrunk slightly into his seat, suddenly spoke up. Are we really turning this into a racial issue? Can't it just be a mistake? Olivia turned to him. It wasn't a mistake when you assumed they were thieves. You spoke from experience. Your own, not theirs. Harper filmed as Jack looked back at Sophia and Nathan. I'm placing both of you under immediate review. You're relieved from duty for this flight. A formal investigation will follow. Sophia's voice cracked. You can't do that. I can. And I just did. Nathan stood stiffly. You're the CEO, but this is still my aircraft, and your authority is revoked the moment it violates the rights of my passengers. Jack said. You've failed your duty today. He turned to Camilla. Who's next in line for this route? Camilla swallowed hard. Amelia Wilson. Sir? And co-pilot Anthony Thomas is scheduled to rotate in New York. Call them in. Jack said. Now. Camilla stepped away quickly. Making the call, Harper whispered to her stream. They're being removed. The CEO just pulled the captain and the flight attendant. Passengers clapped softly. A few stood. A woman from row 4 added, About time someone stood up to this nonsense. Jack turned back to his daughters. You ready to board again? Anna nodded. Nora smiled faintly. We never left. As Sophia and Nathan exited the aircraft in silence, escorted by Andrew, Adam recorded every second. Justin looked away, visibly ashamed. Jack turned to the cabin. Let this be clear. No one should be judged for their skin color, their age, or their quiet presence. This airline was built on respect, and we will protect that value at 3,000 feet and on the ground. Olivia touched his arm gently. Thank you. Jack exhaled and looked at his daughters, now walking proudly back to their seats. Camilla returned with a nod. Replacement crew en route. Harper posted again, accountability in action. This is how we change the culture. As Jack exited the aircraft briefly to debrief legal, passengers buzzed with energy, some applauding softly, some nodding in solidarity. But the damage had been done. And now, justice was catching up fast. The world was watching, and this flight was no longer just a trip to New York. It was a turning point, a lesson, and Jack Sanchez had made sure no one would forget it. Jack Sanchez stood at the front of the first-class cabin, shoulders squared, voice calm but unwavering, as all eyes turned to him, not just because he was the CEO of the airline, but because of the unmistakable gravity in his presence. My daughters were humiliated not because of a security threat, not because of protocol, but because of a deeply embedded assumption that they didn't belong in first class, he said, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. They were treated like trespassers in seats they rightfully owned. That is not a mistake. That is a failure of judgment. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Anna and Nora sat just behind him now, heads high, eyes alert. Harper Thomas stood quietly along the aisle, live streaming the moment with careful framing, the count climbing past 500,000 viewers in real time. Jack continued, You see, this isn't just about my girls. This is about every young person who is told they don't belong, every black child who is met with suspicion before a smile, every quiet voice that's dismissed before it's heard. He took a slow breath. Let me tell you about these two young women, Anna and Nora Sanchez, 14 years old, national debate champions, straight-A students, chosen to represent their school at a national invitational, competing for college scholarships. They are here today because they earned it, and they were ripped from their seats before anyone checked a system, asked a question, or spoke to them like human beings. At that, murmurs rippled through the cabin. Several passengers nodded, others looked down, uncomfortable. Sophia's replacement, Amelia Wilson, stood near the cockpit door, listening quietly, her face composed and professional. Captain Nathan Wright's former seat now awaited Anthony Thomas, the new co-pilot scheduled to take command. Jack turned slightly, gesturing toward his daughters. All they wanted to do was fly to New York, just like any of you. But they were met with suspicion and force. Why? Because they're young. Because they're black. Because someone decided to trust their gut instead of the facts. Anna rose gently from her seat and took a step forward. Her voice was steady. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't argue. We answered every question politely. But it didn't matter. She saw two black girls in first class and assumed it had to be a mistake. Nora followed, voice softer but cutting clear through the air. We didn't ask for special treatment, just fairness. And if this can happen to us, with confirmed tickets, in school uniforms, on our way to a debate, then who else is it happening to in silence? Olivia Smith, seated near them, gave a soft clap, followed by a louder one from a passenger in row 4. Soon. The applause spread like a wave, not a loud ovation, but a quiet agreement, a public acknowledgement of an injustice too often left unspoken. Justin Harris, who had earlier spoken so casually about his own biases, sat stone-faced, his jaw tightened, his eyes flickered toward the floor, then slowly up toward Anna and Nora. He didn't speak, but he no longer looked smug. Harper raised her phone again and panned the room. This is what change looks like, she said into the mic. Not easy, not comfortable, but necessary. Jack looked directly at Sophia Martinez and Captain Nathan Wright, who now stood at the edge of the cabin, awaiting full removal. You both made choices today, Jack said. Choices that impacted two young girls in front of an entire flight of passengers. You can justify it with instinct. You can claim protocol. But what you cannot do is escape accountability. Sophia's face flushed. I didn't mean harm, she said quietly. It was just a feeling. They seemed out of place. Jack didn't raise his voice. You didn't mean to, but you did. And that's the problem. The feeling you had, that they didn't belong, wasn't instinct. It was bias. Captain Wright, attempting to reclaim some dignity, added, You're making an example out of us. Mr. Sanchez? Jack nodded. Yes, I am. Because your example is already being broadcast to 500,000 people, and counting, and what they're seeing is what happens when authority is abused. Adam Turner stepped forward, holding his tablet. We've logged the full passenger history, incident timeline, and witness testimonies. HR and legal have been notified. Both of you are suspended, effective immediately. An internal review will follow. Sophia looked away, humiliated. Nathan Wright opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it. They exited the aircraft without another word, passing Camilla Morris in the aisle, who stood now in her crisp uniform, chin lifted. Harper's followers watched it all, typing furiously. Finally, some accountability. This girl dad CEO just raised the bar. Protect black daughters at all costs. Jack turned back to the passengers. This flight will continue. A new crew is in place. But let this moment stay with you. Not because it was dramatic or viral, but because it was real, and because it happens too often without consequence. He stepped back toward his daughters. Come on, let's sit. As they settled back into their original seats, 1A and 1B, the atmosphere shifted. What had been a tense, conflicted space just moments ago now held something else: respect. Quiet. Maybe, but genuine. Amelia Wilson began the safety briefing with a calm professionalism that drew nods of appreciation. Anthony Thomas, now in the cockpit, prepped the final clearances for takeoff. Jack turned to Anna and Nora. You did good, he said softly. You kept your heads. You didn't let them take your dignity. Anna leaned against him for a brief second. We learned it from you. Harper closed her stream with a final thought. This isn't just a story about two girls and a flight. It's about power. perception, and what happens when someone finally says, enough. As the cabin doors closed and the wheels rolled down the runway, no one could deny that something had shifted, not just on Flight 418, but in the hearts of everyone watching, and justice, long overdue, had finally begun its descent, back in the terminal. The consequences of what had unfolded aboard Flight 418 began to spread like ripples in a pond, no longer just confined to Gate C-22 or the smartphone screens that had recorded it. Jack Sanchez wasted no time. The moment he stepped off the aircraft, he called a senior operations manager, initiating the formal suspension process for Sophia Martinez and Captain Nathan Wright. Effective immediately. He said into his phone, his voice composed but sharp, both are to be removed from the roster pending investigation. I want statements from every crew member and access to internal communications from this flight. Adam Turner, never far from his side, was already compiling the timeline. Every misstep, every witness quote, every detail, inside the aircraft. Amelia Wilson and Anthony Thomas took over with quiet professionalism. Amelia greeted each first-class passenger again, including Anna and Nora, with a warm but respectful tone. "Welcome aboard," she said, as if to reclaim what had been taken from them earlier. Anthony adjusted the cockpit settings, ran the pre-flight checklist, and radioed the tower for final clearance. Camilla Morris, still visibly shaken from being silenced earlier, now stood tall in the front galley. Jack had taken a moment before leaving to thank her directly. "You stood up when it wasn't safe to do so," he told her. "That takes more than courage. It takes character." Camilla blinked back tears. "I just didn't want them to think no one saw them." "They'll never forget that you did," he said, and with a nod, quietly requested her immediate promotion review. Word of her integrity had already reached corporate. Meanwhile, Harper Thomas's video was nearing 800,000 views. Her phone buzzed constantly as comments poured in. News outlets requested interviews, and hashtags like Fly with Dignity and Justice for Twins trended across multiple platforms. "This isn't just a viral clip," she posted in a follow-up. "This is a culture check. This is a mirror held up to every unchecked assumption." Olivia Smith, still sitting beside the twins, pulled out a small notepad and began writing. "What are you doing?" Anna asked. "A petition," she replied without looking up. "To show our support. I want every passenger who saw what happened to sign it. I want your voices remembered." She looked up and smiled. "You girls remind me of my students back when I taught smart, brave, unshakable. I'm proud of you," as the flight prepared for departure. Jack stepped into the terminal conference room with 2 corporate legal officers and an HR representative via video call. "This isn't about damage control," he began. "This is about accountability and transformation. I want a public statement drafted, not just an apology, a plan. We're launching a bias training initiative across the entire airline, real training, not a checkbox. And I want Camilla Morris to be part of it." His voice dropped slightly, firm with resolve. "And this starts now." Inside the cabin, Anna and Nora sat quietly in their seats, looking out the window as the plane began to taxi. For the first time since boarding, there was a sense of calm, not just in their posture, but in the way the passengers around them now glanced their way, no longer with suspicion, but with respect. Apologies came in small, quiet gestures. A middle-aged couple across the aisle offered them bottled water and soft smiles. A flight attendant stopped by with extra snacks. Even Justin Harris, who had sat rigid and defensive for most of the ordeal, now shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He leaned slightly toward them and cleared his throat. I may have misjudged earlier," he muttered. Anna looked at him, waiting. "What made you realize that?" she asked. Not unkindly. Justin hesitated, seeing how you handled it, and how everyone else didn't. "I guess I let my own past cloud my thinking," Nora replied. her voice soft. It's never too late to rethink how you see people, but you have to start. He nodded slowly, humbled. The plane lifted off the runway with a gentle lurch, climbing into the sky in the cockpit. Anthony Thomas looked over at Amelia's voice coming through the intercom, delivering the welcome message with the grace Sophia had lacked. The cabin was still, peaceful now, but it carried the weight of everything that had transpired. Camilla quietly trained the newer crew on service etiquette, pausing between her duties to offer insights, not just on procedures, but on people. Everyone has a story, she said to a younger trainee. Learn to see it before you decide who they are. At cruising altitude, Jack received a text from Adam's statement drafted, legal reviewed. We're ready to go public. Jack typed a quick response. Add a line. This isn't about saving face. It's about doing what's right. Then he put his phone down, turned toward the window, and closed his eyes for the first time that day. Back inside the cabin, Harper posted one final clip before switching off airplane mode. For anyone wondering how this ends, it doesn't end. It begins. With policy, with voices, with people who refuse to be silent when it matters most. By the time the plane crossed into New York airspace, the airline's official statement had been posted. It acknowledged the incident, praised the strength of the Sanchez twins, and committed to long-term changes, including a new diversity and equity task force. It named Camilla Morris as one of the founding members, and at the center of it all. Two black girls sat side by side, their heads leaning together, hearts full, not with bitterness, but with purpose. What began as humiliation had become a movement, a lesson that would travel far beyond that plane. And justice, though delayed, had found its wings. As Flight 418 soared above the clouds, cruising at 36,000 feet. The atmosphere within the cabin had shifted dramatically from the tense, uncomfortable silence of earlier. It was as if the plane itself had exhaled, shedding the weight of prejudice and fear that had clung to it before takeoff. Amelia Wilson moved down the aisle with calm precision, offering drinks and meals with the kind of care that didn't need to be performative. It was simply part of who she was. Her presence radiated assurance, professionalism, and, above all, dignity in the cockpit. Co-pilot Anthony Thomas reviewed flight readings with quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the rigid defensiveness of his predecessor. Everything about the aircraft felt steadier now, not just in its trajectory, but in its spirit. Anna and Nora Sanchez sat in their original seats, 1A and 1B, shoulders relaxed, heads tilted slightly as they stared out the window at the sky that stretched endlessly ahead. Anna had her debate folder open, reading aloud softly from the notes they had prepared for the competition in New York. Nora followed along, occasionally adding a quiet thought or adjusting a phrase, though they had just endured one of the most humiliating experiences of their young lives. Their focus had not wavered. They were still preparing, still striving, still pushing forward. What if the opening line was simpler? Nora whispered, like, injustice isn't just what's said, it's what's assumed. Anna paused, then smiled. That's strong. A few rows behind them. Olivia Smith sipped her tea and watched them with pride. The quiet strength of those girls reminded her of her former students, the ones who had grown up to lead protests, win scholarships, become lawyers and doctors. She pulled her notepad back out and continued collecting signatures from passengers willing to support a formal letter of complaint and solidarity. We owe them that much, she said softly to a man in 4C, who signed without hesitation. Camilla Morris, now stationed in the front galley, moved with a renewed sense of purpose. She was still young, still technically in training, but the events of the morning had aged her in a way that felt necessary. She had seen what it meant to speak up and what it cost to stay silent. And now, as she helped manage the flight. She felt a quiet clarity guiding her. She paused near the jump seat where a new trainee sat. "Do you know their names?" she asked, nodding toward Anna and Nora. The trainee hesitated. "I heard, but I'm not sure." "Anna and Nora Sanchez," Camilla said gently. "Before you serve a passenger, learn their name. See the person, not the profile." The trainee nodded slowly, eyes widening with understanding. In the back of the cabin, Harper Thomas, phone now in airplane mode, reviewed the footage she had captured. The comments were still flooding in, even without new uploads. Viewers had begun to tag national news outlets, calling for broader media coverage. Harper had done her share of advocacy work before, but something about this felt different. It wasn't just about exposure, it was about evolution. She opened a new draft in her notes app titled #FlyWithDignity campaign and began to write ideas for a nationwide movement promoting accountability and equity in air travel. A line at the top read, "Because two girls kept their seat and made room for change in the cockpit." Anthony received an update from HQ. Public response to the company's statement had been overwhelmingly positive. There was praise for Jack Sanchez's transparency, admiration for how the girls had handled themselves, and even tentative acknowledgement from critics who'd once dismissed conversations about bias in air travel as exaggerations. A message had been sent, and it was being heard. Meanwhile, Jack Sanchez, seated in row 1C now that his daughters had returned to theirs, glanced out the window with a rare stillness in his expression. He had spent years building American Sky Airlines into one of the most respected names in aviation. But today, none of that mattered more than his daughters' safety, their dignity, and their sense of belonging in a world that too often challenged it. He glanced over at them again. They weren't smiling, but they were focused, calm, intact. And that meant everything. He leaned over and spoke low enough for only them to hear. "You don't have to be loud to make change. Sometimes, just being present is power." Anna reached across and gave his hand a quick squeeze. Nora offered a soft nod. "We're listening," she said, "and we're learning." As the plane gently began its descent toward New York, Amelia's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare for landing, we thank you for your patience today. We hope this flight reminds you that kindness isn't just a courtesy. It's a responsibility." A few scattered claps followed. Olivia looked up from her notepad. "She said that well." She whispered to the passenger beside her. "Very well." Camilla smiled in the galley, pride glowing beneath her calm exterior. For her, this was more than a flight. It was a turning point. She had faced pressure, silence, fear, but she had acted. And now, she was no longer just a trainee. She was part of something larger, something changing. Harper titled her final clip before landing, "From Humiliation to Hope, the Flight That Started a Movement," and drafted a subtitle, "Two Girls, One Plane, A Country Watching." The feed would go live the moment wheels hit the ground. Across the cabin, heads rested easier against headrests. Conversations resumed in softer tones, and glances toward Anna and Nora now carried something different. Respect, not pity. Recognition, not avoidance. And as the plane's wheels finally touched down on the runway in New York, the passengers applauded, not out of routine, but out of a shared sense that something meaningful had just happened in the sky above them. In that moment, Jack Sanchez looked at his daughters and whispered, "Welcome to New York. You've already won more than any trophy." And in their eyes, those quiet, resilient eyes, it showed. The flight had taken off in tension, but it landed in transformation. The air in New York felt different as Anna and Nora Sanchez stepped off Flight 418, not because of the chill of the city or the bustling terminal lights, but because of what they had just carried through the sky and into the world. With their debate folders tucked under their arms, and Camilla Morris walking behind them with quiet pride. The twins moved with a presence that was no longer just about resilience. It was about purpose. Jack Sanchez watched from a distance as his daughters were greeted by their debate coach at the gate. The coach, eyes wide with concern, rushed forward. "I saw what happened," she said breathlessly. "It's everywhere." Anna nodded calmly. "We're fine. We're focused," Nora added. "We're ready." And they were, hours later, at the National Invitational. Anna and Nora stood on stage, blazers crisp, voices steady, facing down their opponents not with anger, but with precision. Their topic, systemic bias in modern institutions. Their performance wasn't just strong, it was electric. Every example, every statistic, every quote came alive with the weight of lived experience. When Anna ended the final round with the words, "We don't just argue for truth, we live it," the audience rose to their feet. The judges didn't deliberate long. That evening, the Sanchez twins were crowned national champions in their acceptance speech. They dedicated the win to every child who was told, "You don't belong here," and to everyone who stood up and said, "Yes, you do." The applause that followed wasn't just for their eloquence, it was for their courage. Back in Atlanta, American Sky Airlines issued a second public statement, this one more personal, signed by Jack himself. It detailed the steps being taken: a new mandatory anti-bias program for all flight staff, a passenger advocacy hotline, and the creation of a diversity and equity task force led in part by Camilla Morris, who was officially promoted from trainee to assistant director of crew development. "We cannot change what we do not face," the letter read, "but we can choose who we become next." Sophia Martinez and Nathan Wright, now under formal review, were given the option to participate in restorative justice sessions as part of their disciplinary process. After initial resistance, both agreed. Sophia, after reading public reactions and receiving messages from former co-workers and passengers, had begun to confront her unconscious biases. "I didn't see what I didn't want to see," she admitted in one internal debrief. "But I do now, and I want to do better." Nathan, more reserved, said little, but signed up for the company's new mentorship program aimed at re-educating crew leadership on equitable treatment and inclusive command. Harper Thomas, meanwhile, watched her platform explode. Major networks reached out, and she chose to appear only on a few, prioritizing those that centered the twins' voices, not just her footage. She launched a campaign, #FlyWithDignity, featuring stories from other passengers across the country who had experienced similar injustices. The goal wasn't just to expose bias, it was to change the industry from the inside. Donations poured in, which Harper used to fund scholarships for young students pursuing journalism, law, and aviation. Olivia Smith began visiting local schools, sharing what she had witnessed and encouraging students to recognize their voice, their value, and the power of standing up even when others sit down. She published an op-ed titled "What I Didn't Say at 3,000 Feet, and Why I'll Never Stay Silent Again," which resonated with readers nationwide. As for Justin Harris, after returning home, he sat alone one night scrolling through the video Harper had taken. The moment Anna looked him in the eye and said, "We're not your past mistake." He paused the video and let the words settle. Then he did something unexpected. He opened his social media account, wrote a short, sincere apology, and hit post. "I judged 2 young women based on a scar I refused to heal. I was wrong. That moment changed me, and I hope it keeps changing me." The post went viral. Days later, he reached out to the Sanchez family privately, not to clear his conscience, but to thank them for opening his eyes. for Jack. Life returned to the rhythm of board meetings, press interviews, and daily operations. But something fundamental had shifted. He began every Monday now with a personal call to 3 randomly selected employees to ask them how they were doing and what needed to change. When asked why, he simply said, "You can't lead from above. You have to sit where they sit, at home." Anna and Nora found themselves invited to speak at schools, youth summits, and civil rights panels. They never portrayed themselves as victims, but as witnesses to a reality that needed reshaping. One morning, standing in front of a class of 6th graders, Nora held up her boarding pass and said, "This paper got us a seat, but our voice, our truth, is what helped us keep it." And the students listened, rapt, not just because of what had happened, but because of what could still happen next. Months later, the girls boarded another flight, this time on a different route, with no cameras, no press, no spotlight. As they walked down the jet bridge, the flight attendant greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Sanchez. Your seats are ready. No second glance, no raised eyebrows, just respect." As they settled into their seats, Jack watched from across the aisle, arms folded gently, pride in his eyes. They didn't have to say anything. The look they exchanged said it all. Their journey was never just about a flight. It was about being seen, being heard, and being treated as equal. And as the plane lifted into the sky once again, it carried with it more than passengers. It carried proof that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply refuses to leave the seat it rightfully earned. If this story touched you, like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.